of this watershed function, will some of that money be going towards studying that kind of thing, or have there been studies made on a different source of supply apart from aquifers, not just the aquifers? Is there a study or are there plans to look at storage of water in other areas such as reservoirs, etc.?
Madam Chair, through you, to the Director, and I'm wanting to tease out the difference between the function that we've got in front of us right now, the South Cowichan function, and the larger function. You're completely right. We've got watersheds in this region which have no surface storage. We primarily have Lake Cowichan and Shawnigan Lake. Everything else is surface-driven or groundwater, for the most part. We've got minor Oliphant Lake, Little Sutton Lake, etc. But those are minor storage issues. We would not necessarily invest in exploration of what is an extremely expensive and highly regulated response in terms of capital infrastructure investment until we actually analyzed whether there is a deficit. Are there other tools to address those deficits before we start looking at an infrastructure fix? So the larger regional study will look at each of the watersheds, over time identify the growth parameters and scenarios, as well as the physical and yield characteristics of those watersheds for long-term water supply. And in those cases, we would likely look at mechanisms in terms of reducing demand where possible, or increasing storage opportunities, not necessarily transboundary movement of water, but within the carrying capacity of that watershed. So that's a long-term process, and it ties very closely to the work of Mr. Blackwell of the sort of the regional growth planning strategy where it makes sense to put people and demand for water. So. I apologize. Sorry. Thank you. Wave at me. So this function is paid for by the electorate of areas A, B, and C. It follows a watershed-based methodology. Liquid waste master planning process is a long-term planning strategy which looks at the projected growth in the area and the ability of the watershed to assimilate waste. And so it's looking at sort of two pieces. Can we assimilate liquid waste? And by that I mean fecal waste, whether it's human or not, is sometimes a bit of a discussion point. The provincial guidelines, which is what we follow, also allow us to look at stormwater management and non-point source pollution. Given the limited funding that we've had, we have spoken to the province and they're allowing us to limit it to simply the liquid waste management component at this time. They are 26 discrete, similar to the water, sewer utilities within the area. Some of them are the CVRD, some are small stratas, but they have developed over time. And so part of this work, which we are proposing, is to continue to complete the first phase of the standard liquid waste management planning process, which is to look at the state of the existing infrastructure. We've done that. Look at the population projections and scenarios about where they might settle over time, and to come up with a long list of potential scenarios. The original liquid waste management plan for this area called for a single facility that would serve the entire 3 electoral areas at a phenomenal cost. At this point, we are being much more rational about that and basically identifying that they are nodes of growth where it makes sense to site plans. And so this process looks at developing engineering scenarios to address those issues. It also includes a public consultation phase where we take the criteria in which we are going to put those options against and allows the public to say whether or not that decision matrix meets their needs. Have we missed something that's critical to them? This process allows us at the end of, we're hoping at the end of 2019 to complete phase one, and then we would be looking at basically the second phase, which is the detailed analysis of a much shorter list of scenarios and opportunities to move forward. It allows us to then have much more detailed financial projections. Ultimately, the plan after you go through that process, similar to a solid waste management plan, it is signed off by the minister, which gives the CVRD a regulatory opportunity to actually implement the recommendations arising from the plan. And that could be with regards to investment in infrastructure or investment and a regulatory framework around non-point source pollution and the management of septic discharge into the environment as well. So this is a long-term technical planning process that we're undertaking. We attempted in 2018, I shouldn't say attempted, in 2018 we did a lot of the backstory technical work. Staff put in a substantial amount of time doing the background characterization, some of the water quality components that are required as part of the receiving environment's ability to assimilate. We went to the market in the spring and summer of 2018 with limited funds and did not receive any appropriate responses to our RFP. Now that we've moved it forward with this particular request and the increase to requisition to cover that, we're hopeful that we will be receiving a response to our request for proposal within the next 2 weeks. So that's where we are
Ms.
at this point
Saldera
in time.
has something to add?
I apologize for not noticing it sooner, but I would ask that potentially that this budget get referred back to staff because there is a potential issue with the cap on the requisition limit.
So this one also be referred back. The motion to refer been moved and seconded. Is okay.
Sorry, we're
All in favor?
mouthing things to each other.
Any opposed? Motion's carried. Do you still wish to ask a question, Director Salmon? You were on the list. Oh, I didn't have you. I did have Director Salmon before we had the motion to refer. Yes.
Yeah, just so for example, the Mill Bay Sewer, the $6 million project that's gotten started recently, how does that relate? Like that was done independent of this plan, I take it? This plan's not yet been approved, and yet we go ahead with, just comment on that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It's a great question, and it really allows us to highlight the value of adaptive planning. So when those proposals were put forward, we had done some of the background work. We knew where we were going generally, and we also knew that based on the, just the reality check of 26 discrete systems, there were some no regrets actions that we could take. When we put the grant funding in place, we also, framed it in a way that there is a large master plan. Certainly our federal and provincial funders like to know that you've got a master plan. You're not just asking for one-off kind of grant applications. So it works really nicely as part of the larger plan as an adaptive piece. So there's no point waiting for 3 or 4 years before this plan is completed, it's gone to the minister for sign-off, before you would action items that you know that you want to do and which are within the CVRD's purview with regards to rationalizing our own infrastructure and partnering with others to provide a higher level of service.
Director Acton, you also had, did you have a follow-up, Director Salmon? Sorry, my apologies.
No
Then
problem.
Director Acton.
But just to follow up, so if we can, why not, to be bold, just dispense with this whole master plan altogether if we can go ahead and get $6 million and do actual work? What's the point of?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Maybe I'll use an OCP as an example. You've got a master plan in terms of how you want your community to develop over time. And then you've got land use applications, which you're hoping are aligned with that larger vision. It's important to have that larger vision because at this point, our analysis indicates that a lot of the development that has happened in the South End has happened outside of the urban containment boundaries, which means that the investment in infrastructure is going elsewhere. It is not being rationalized. And one of the things that we know with regards to infrastructure is you want dense communities and that you want reinvestment in that infrastructure over and over again. Otherwise, the development at the end of the day costs the community a greater amount of money. So with regards to that particular strategy, we communicated to the funder, it's all about a business case to the funder as well, that it was a rational approach and a staged way to move towards the completion of the master plan. So it's not outside of it, it's aligned with it.
Director Acton?
Yeah, I guess I'm getting a little confused here today because, so the South Sector Liquid Waste Master Plan that was created how many years ago? In 1998 is no longer relevant anymore. And so that's not even part of phase one. But I have another question. When you started your presentation, you stated that stormwater was not included or it will be included because that was also a topic that was originally part of the watershed function as well. So.
Ms. Miller?
Thank you. Great question, Director Acton. What I'm referring to is we are following the provincial methodology. So they make recommendations about what should be in a plan in a perfect world, assuming that you've got the investment required to do that. Given the limited amount of funding in this particular program, $150,000 to do an extremely technical piece of work is not enough money. We went to the ministry, and they are part of this process, and said to them, we need to do this in a structured approach that builds forward. We need to focus on infrastructure and rationalize infrastructure in relationship to population projections. We cannot afford to do the stormwater management at this particular point of
Mr.
time.
Hatami would like to add something.
Oh, thank you, Hammett.
Sorry, I just wanted to add a little bit of comment here about the so-called guideline, the interim BC guideline to conduct actually the master plan in particular for wastewater. That interim guideline is not an act, and as a wishful list, they want to include water and drainage, stormwater management, and everything. But the fact is, most municipalities do not have enough budget to conduct, the 3 phases of all of those integrated kind of functions. Because just only a stage 1, just for your information, the stage 1 of a wastewater master plan costs between $120,000 and $180,000. Phase 2 is about $120,000, not including actually the staff, time, and phase 3, roughly about $100,000. So that's the cost of actually conducting a complete 3-phase. Just want to let you know that's a guideline. Not necessarily we have to actually follow that. It's good to have it. That's why when we had this discussion with the ministry, they agreed to let us do just only the wastewater side of it, not to include the drainage, not include the water. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Moving on now to R26. I believe it's either Jason Adair or is it Mr. Hatami? It was referred back. They were both referred. R24 and R25 have been referred. And we're moving on to R26. Good afternoon, Jason. Welcome.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Budget 515 is for the CVRD's curbside collection service in all electoral areas. This service provides bi-weekly curbside recycling for 13,500 homes in all electoral areas. and biweekly garbage collection services for approximately 5,500 homes in areas D, E, F, G, and I. Areas F and I also receive weekly summer collection in the summer months. The budget is, the bigger ticket items within the budget include the funding of the wages for 2 full-time operators, portions of specific administrative staff, operations and maintenance for 3 collection trucks, a capital reserve fund, debt servicing for 3 trucks and 19,000 waste collection totes, and the disposal of 1,600 tons of garbage and 1,900 tons of recycling annually. This budget is funded strictly through user fees. Depending on the level of service that a home receives, they'll receive a utility bill. And it's also funded through the stewardship agency Recycle BC. The CVRD signed a contract with Recycle BC last year that expires in 2023. And this sees every home that receives curbside recycling receives $34.50 annually for the service. And they also provide $43,000 annually for education. There is no tax requisition for this budget, and there is no increase proposed to the user fees in 2019. The 515 does have a healthy capital reserve budget. There's currently $584,000 in the budget for the replacement of collection trucks. There are some challenges within the program. Those have to do with the contamination rate in the curbside recycling. Part of the conditions of the contract with Recycle BC is a goal of 3% contamination. Currently, the CVRD is at about 13%. So there's been a number of measures put into place to lower that contamination level, including software that's been installed in the trucks that enables the operators to actually see what's being dumped into the truck, and they're able to press a button on a monitor within the cab that gets communicated to dispatch. And then there's some follow-up at that particular residence where we go and have a look and then provide some education materials to that residence. That does require staffing on the ground to do that. And so we're able to contain that in the current labor budget, but it is a challenge that we'll face in 2019 to get that contamination rate lowered. There are potential consequences if we're not able to do that, including financial penalties and also some operational things that can be done. We're working very closely with Recycle BC. I don't think we're close to that stage yet, but we do have to move, we do have to lower that contamination rate. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That is something, that contamination rate we've been working on. I'm surprised that it hasn't lowered, because we did a real push on that, and that is interesting.
Yeah.
So something we have to continually work on.
That's right, and it has lowered a little bit by about 1%.
Oh, 1%.
That's right. That being said, there's been several thousand totes that have been left behind where that material didn't make it into the stream. So we know that it has been lowered, but there definitely is work left to do.
Okay, right. Director Salmon, you have a question for staff?
Please, thank you. So 2 questions, actually. One, so do you happen to know, is the contamination rate lower in the areas where you also have the garbage pickup?
We actually see an elevated level of contamination in areas that don't have mandatory collection, where areas A, B, C, and H, there is a subscription service available from the private sector, and we do see elevated contamination levels in those areas. In fact, we'll find household garbage in totes occasionally.
And then the second question, what are the rates, the user fee this year, and I assume they're going up a little bit?
And they're not anticipated to go up in 2019. In 2018, areas A, B, C, and H, they were $15 a year. Areas D, E, and G, they were $122 a year, but that included garbage collection as well. And areas F and I, they're $138 annually. And that's because they get that weekly garbage collection in the summer months.
Okay, thank you.
Director Wilson, then Nicholson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just looking at the figures on here, and in 2018, the budget was $524,000 for wages and salaries, wages and benefits, and the 2018 actual comes to $288,800. There's a difference of $235,000, if I'm reading this correctly, underspent. and yet in 2019, we're asking for 500,000. I realise this is not a requisition, but this is just for my own clarification.
Okay. Ms.
So,
Solder,
actually, I'll defer
You
that
have-
to Solder
okay.
there.
The report that you're looking at is actually dated August. So the budget for this function was completed in August because it's not a requisition function, so it was completed quite early. So the information that you're looking at with respect to 2018 is as of an August date. Yes. Not off the top of my head, no.
yes, follow up, Director Wilson?
And with those wages and benefits there, how many staff is that for?
So under that, under wages and benefits, that is 2 full-time operators, so people in the truck, and then there's also a half a position of an operator and the relief staff for the truck drivers, and it also includes administrative staff, so a portion of my salary and some other specific staff members, it funds portions of their salary.
Director Nicholson and Director Morrison. You got it.
I'm just wondering about this contamination, and maybe we should be upping the cost of recycling to people to make a point.
Staff are currently looking at a number of different options. The software that we're using in the truck has given us a lot of really good data. So we're going to be coming back to the committee with some suggestions and some recommendations in the future. That could see anything from suspension of service for folks that just aren't getting it, but we really want to educate people because a lot of times people don't understand how the program
Yeah,
works. So we
it's
want to reach them
complicated.
first. There's also capacity within the bylaw currently to issue a $100 fine to folks. We don't want to get to that point, but we want, I think at some point that may be a recommendation to the committee that's something that we can pursue.
Follow up,
But
Director
we've been
Nicholson?
giving them a rebate, have we not, or reducing the cost?
Yeah, as part of the contract with Recycle BC, there's a rebate given to the CVRD to help fund curbside recycling.
And we could hold that back for a year, and could we not? And
That could be done. I think
I mean,
there
there's
would be a more there might be a different way to do that. Other jurisdictions that we're looking at that are dealing with the exact same issue that we are, because it is an issue across all the programs. And we're following their lead, and we're providing education, considering fine through the bylaw, and just doing the follow-up, investing in the software, getting the data, and reaching the folks that aren't using the program properly. Because waste isn't super easy to know what
Yeah.
goes in those totes, and at a rate of 13%, that's still 87% of the material is good. So it's just reaching those folks that are really struggling with understanding how the program works, and we will come back with some recommendations on that.
Director Morrison. And then Director Kuhn. And maybe we
got a
could have a resolution.
couple of questions and a comment. What's a new truck cost?
Estimated cost of a new truck is $450,000.
So
That's an estimate.
Fair to say we got one in the bank, we're saving on the second one.
That's correct. There's one in
Okay.
the bank, and then, yeah.
Okay, and they're expensive and they do wear out, and 10-year life expectancy sort of idea?
Yeah, depending on how many hours per year, that's more relevant, but yeah, approximately 10 years.
Okay, second question to you is in regards to the state of our Recycle BC contract. Yeah, we've just signed a new one. We're now hearing that they might not have been as enthusiastic to sign a contract with us when they found out after the fact that we didn't have universal garbage collection throughout the whole region. But any comments on state of our relationship with them these days?
Yeah, we're working very closely with them. I'd say it is a positive relationship. They have a lot of resources, so they monitor the programs very, very closely. Our materials goes through a regular comprehensive audit at least once a month. We've provided them with an action plan on what we're going to do to lower contamination. And so we're working very closely with them. I'd describe it as a positive relationship with the understanding that we do need to get that contamination rate down.
Okay, thank you. So my last comment, and I must be getting tired because I'm gonna use the word workshop again. I'm agreeing with a lot of, what Director Nicholson was beginning to allude to. I don't know how Jason convinced me to come out on a Friday afternoon to the Bings Creek in the middle of July, and it was hot and unpleasant, and it was Area F's time to have the recycling come into the depot. And we've got some issues. And part of when this program came in and MMBC, now Recycle BC, was offering dollars to us, was to reward the source sorter for sorting well, and you know, we knew we wouldn't be at the contamination rate they wanted at the beginning, but we're not even close.
Whoa, no
And
gold
so-
star for you.
No gold star. So I think that we should be thinking about looking at perhaps our fee structure. I think the $136 a year that my residents pay for garbage collection is a pretty good deal, and it's been like that for a number of years. I think the last year under the private contractor was in excess of $170 a year, and this in-house service has been a lot cheaper. But I think that when I saw the degree of contamination and quite frankly, the disregard of some of the recycling principles that we're trying to achieve, that was coming in the totes, that we may be forced at some point to look at a post-collection sorting to ensure that the materials that we're sending off are less contaminated than we're currently getting them at curbside. So the long and the short of what I'm saying is, I think we're gonna have to start doing a little bit around bringing up the curbside collection rates, and perhaps looking at having funds available to invest in the type of mechanical sorting opportunities that you and I discussed at that meeting on that Friday afternoon, because I don't think we're gonna be in Recycle BC's good books for a whole bunch longer if we're not able to at least
Well,
approach that 3%
Right, well, we could be
rate.
rewarding the good behavior too, because,
True.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm looking for, I have Director Kuhn, and maybe you can move the resolution when you're finished.
Yes, maybe I missed this. What's happening in 2021?
So, Madam Chair, I believe Director Kuhn's looking at the 5-year plan in 2021, where there's an increase there. I'm just going to pull that up for myself.
There's a vast increase in operational costs and in user fees, and I just wonder what,
So that number has to do with the solid waste management plan. So as you're aware,
it'll be folded in then, or what?
it'll be considered again in 2021. Right now, as part of the solid waste management plan, one of the recommendations was universal curbside collection in the electoral areas. So that has now been sent off to the province, and it's awaiting approval down there. So we anticipate that will come back prior to the end of 2019, and we'll be looking at different models for that recommendation. The board will be able to consider that at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Could you move the recommendation?
I move,
It's been moved and seconded, it's okay. And Mr. Blackwell, could you read it, please? Garbage is always a hot topic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that function 515, curbside collection 2019 draft budget be approved.
Looking for, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Moving on now to R 26, no, 27, woo-hoo, 27. Function 130, electoral feasibility study, report from the Water Management Division. Welcome again.
Yes, thank you,
Mr.
Madam Chair.
Dennison.
Excuse me again. Budget 130 is the electoral area feasibility studies function. So what we do there is all the electoral areas are taxed. It goes into this pot, and we use the money to conduct feasibility studies. If the result of the feasibility study ends up in a new function, then we charge the cost of that study from the function back into this feasibility function. So as it turns out, last few years, we've been recovering some money from past studies. And so we have $58,000 left in the kitty, so we don't need any requisition for this year, for 2019. We think that's adequate for what we're seeing on the horizon at this point.
Motion
So,
to move the recommendation.
no requisition.
Second.
I thought you'd
I
like
like
that
it
one.
now. Okay, we're speeding up a little bit. Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation before you is that function 130, electoral feasibility studies 2019 draft report, draft budget, I should say, be approved.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. R28, function 575, engineering services. Welcome, Mr. Hatami.
Thank you. This is actually the easiest budget and very simple,
Yay.
straightforward, trust me.
Good. Happy.
The 2019 budget for this function is the same as last year, with one exception that we got approved supplemental item, the budget, and that's for purchasing or to replacing in our old vehicle, the Jeep. There is no overall changes in the allocation. There is no change in the core budget. We have a fairly healthy budget. Operating reserve is over $104,000, and then the capital reserve is over $13,000. But this budget actually provides for maintenance, repair, fuel, and et cetera, for 3 vehicles, except one of them that we don't pay anything for the fuel and oil change. And you will be surprised why, because it's electric car.
Woohoo!
So also it provides, funds or expenditures for stationaries, for printers, photocopiers, office supplies, and training, and telephone, and IT, and so on and so forth.
That's been moved.
Thank you.
Second. Okay, Mr. Blackwell, do your magic. We're moving right along here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation before you is that function 575, engineering services 2019 draft budget, be approved.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Moving on now to R29, function 576, engineering utilities. Mr. Dennison and Louise Canodle-Joy. Welcome again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll settle in here for a little while.
Oh, okay. Will you?
Just for the new directors particularly, just a couple
Okay.
background or quick
Yes,
notes
that is
on the
good.
utility budgets. So unlike a lot of other budgets, we don't, for the sewer and water in particular, which are the main budgets here, we don't charge requisition. There's parcel tax and user fees that are just charged within the area, and they're not part of the overall requisition number. So when we talk about, overall whatever X% change in requisition, this is not part of that. Okay, it's separate. And the service is very discreet, right? So people get a pipe to their house and either takes away sewage or adds water or does both. Well, not the same pipe. So they have a very direct sense of the service they're getting, right? And what they're paying for that. The parcel tax is a flat rate per parcel, and the user fee is a variable rate, depending on their level of use when they're connected. We also have street lighting, of course, and also the drainage, but they're quite small. They're on requisition, but they're very, very small services with very low numbers. All of the services are discrete areas. As I say, they're an area on a map defined, except for critical street lighting, which is the electoral area. So as I say, there's a very strong sense of who's getting that service and who is not. With a lot of our budgets, there's a lot of the line items are not necessarily intent to spend money on something, but an allowance should X or Y occur. So things happen to us, right? We get water main breaks, we have overflows, we had I&I problems in the wintertime with all the rains, et cetera. These sorts of things come up. And so we try and have a lot of the line items are essentially kind of a contingency item for things that might happen. In some of our utilities, we have regular problems. Every year in Saltaire, unfortunately, we always get water main breaks, it seems. We're working on trying to nail that problem, but we do get them. In others, we might not see that, but we might too. We don't really know. So some of our items are like that, and there's a kind of a contingency item for it. For our overhead costs, inside staff and overheads are evenly allocated to all of our customers. So it's on a per property basis. So all of the costs for the inside staff and our regular overheads that we pay in this 576 budget, which we'll do next, are just a straight flat allocation per parcel over all of our services. The outside staff, the operators who actually do work at each of the utilities, they track their time, and that's charged directly to the system according to time spent. But we average over 5 years. Instead of it being on a year-by-year basis, we roll that over a 5-year period, so that if there's a bad year, when we say have a big rainstorm, or it's really dry, or there's other kinds of problems that come up, and they've had to put a lot of time in, we don't have too much of a shock to our customers. So they still pay in the end, but it's just averaged out over time instead of one shock at one time. Right, okay, so that's some backgrounder on this. The first budget ahead of you is 576, so it's similar to 575. This is our collection budget, where we allocate out costs that are used by all of our services to all those services. So we've got vehicles in here, we've got training costs, those kinds of things, and they're allocated out to all of them. For 2019, we've got a 5.25% increase to core. That's partly wages and benefits, administrative costs, some vehicle expenses. There's some vehicle debt costs have dropped though, so that's helpful. We have in that budget a big lump that's the Mill Bay Sewer System Amalgamation Project. So we've got a lot of money in there, but that's because we don't have a function for that yet established. That will come. But in the meantime, we've just put it in 576, so it's got an actual budget to be in. So if you're wondering why that's there, that's 100% funded by grant though, so it doesn't affect the rest of the budgets at all. It's just a place to put it so we can track it properly until we establish that function. So that's 576, Madam Chair.
Okay, are there any questions on 576? Looking for direction. Director Nicholson, you moving it? It's been moved. Is there a seconder? Been moved and seconded. Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation before you is that function 576.
So I'm asking now, 1 through 13 will be moved, 1 through 18 will be moved as a block unless a director would like to speak to one individually. Seeing none, it'll be moved as a block. Motion to move, moved and seconded. Mr. Blackwell, 1 through 18. Ain't gonna happen? Okay.
I'd be happy to.
I'll let you off this time.
Thank you.
Because we'd be happy about that too. So basically, these are all the street light functions. Can we go ahead and just move them like that unless we want them all? That's good, okay. Yeah, I got approval on that one. All righty. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried in a 10-minute break. I'd like to let you know there are sandwiches in the fridge. If you want to pick them up. They're lunch snacks.
On that lighting issue, put up the street light, how many do you have to have on a petition? You don't, okay, is there a form that they have to have?
They want a critical street light to you, to us, and if the people that
That included the 1 million for the mill-based sewer?
Yeah, yes, it includes it, but it's not, it's an in and out budget. So that's not, it's not really, like, it's not a function. It's just a cost center, right? So the expenses come into it, so like the photocopying, staff costs for utilities only, vehicles, training, there's a whole bunch of stuff. All that's pooled into that one place, 576, and then is allocated out. So you see that engineering overhead is the line item you see in all the functions, and that's where that comes into the particular thing. And it's allocated,
the engineering overhead, and that's money that's coming in for wages too.
So the 2 million, that does not include the 1 million for mill bay?
No, that's down here. We had 2 million, we're gonna have 1 million in for the Mill Bay one in 2019. We got the grants late in the year, so this was already done. So this was half Cobble Hill and Mill Bay. The Cobble Hill one, we have a new function now, we have the AAP, so we're moving that whole
so taking
grant.
this number out, part of it.
And then we're gonna have
To
1
cover it.
million next year.
There'll be just $1 million left in, just for the engineering work and whatever to get.
And then once we have a function for Mill Bay, then we'll move it into the new function for Mill Bay.
Yeah,
So
okay.
for now, it's the grant.
So without the grants, the budget is roughly 2.5 million?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. always get this, it's funny, the staff reports they often don't, they say what percent increase it is, but they don't say what
What the maximum
the
was.
actual amount, so we can,
Yeah.
it's hard, before you get to know, it's hard to know proportionally, we're talking about 200,000 or 2 million.
Yeah.
Well, and as I say, it's a very different meaning for utilities too, whether it's 30 customers or 900 customers, right?
Huge.
So there's,
There's that too.
yeah, so it's really funny it's often hard to get a grip on whether something means something or doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's significant or not.
It is.
Yeah.
A little cheat sheet that's, yeah, I guess in the staff report, if they have those two things, per customer and the overall budget. Because, you know, the way it's set up now that we're all electronic, you gotta scroll through all these
Yes.
these things.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
like 6 different types.
Yes.
Yeah.
You gotta back and forth trying to,
Yeah,
Find
it's
out
really
where
hard
it
to.
was.
And
Yeah.
you gotta do all the budgets. All the budgets, yes. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so even if you want to come afterwards and see
See, the thing-
what people are paying for each of them, you
Oh,
know.
here we are.
This is the one that we use it.
Yeah,
we
all
use,
right,
For
yeah.
example, Satellite Park, they pay 300 in user fees, and we're increasing it about $40 for the requisition. So we'll say there's an increase in requisition of 3,000, but it's like
Yeah.
$40 per home.
So what's the range then for water? What's,
Wow, our big ones, Elkington Forest is gonna
That's
be
the
That's the
huge
worst
one.
one, that's over 2,000.
2,000
yeah.
a year. The cheapest is Eagle Heights Sewer, it's 360 a year.
Yeah, 400 now, I think.
400, yeah, we raised it to
Yeah,
400 a year.
that's probably
So
the lowest.
between 400.
For, that's for their
Sewer.
sewer.
Yeah.
We don't have sewer treatment in Eagle Heights, we just pump it all to Jethro, so we don't have a treatment plant there.
Yeah.
So, but each one has its own story too,
Yeah.
why some
Yeah.
are high. Some of them have, problems like manganese or
Some terrible problems with small number of customers.
arsenic or whatever, so small thing with arsenic, so their costs are high. Other ones are great big, Salterra's got a big system, so it's not as, everyone's got a
And
story.
sewer and water generally about the same? 600, 800 a
varies
year,
quite a
they're all
bit.
over?
From, yes, anywhere from
Yeah.
500 a year to
Yeah.
400 a year to 2,000 a year, so.
okay.
I'm
We have
not
that
an
one in the
Nova
North
study
Woodley
kind of-
Range, we charge them about 1,600 a year, and they get 1/4 the water that everybody else gets. Because their wells run dry, so they have to haul it in. And they've got a really high overage rate because they have to haul it by truck. So it's very expensive.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's,
the ANOVA study
that ANOVA study kind of had some of the things.
shows.
Do they have the rates in there as well?
I
It
can't
was
remember.
rough, though.
It was pretty rough, yeah, it just gives a picture. I wouldn't count on that in any detailed way. It's useful to kind of get the picture overall.
Right.
And there's a lot of stuff too that they've got in there that are, to be honest, not very useful to us in a regional district setting. Much easier to use in a municipality. Yeah.
Yeah, but we'd be happy to go through.
But an example, of where it's just very, very different, where a regional district is really unique. Normally, the decision makers in any organization deal with the big pieces, right? So like a budget meeting for Exxon Corporation, for Joe's Shoe Shop, for anything, you look at the big pieces, right? Here, you have to wade through endless
Yeah.
details. You're pushed right down to the bottom,
Yeah.
right? You're looking at $50 line
Can I call the meeting back to order? I can try, all righty. I'm trying to put the meeting back to order, and we'll move on now to R31. And I would like to move R31 from 1 to 30 as a block as well, unless there is we're missing some directors, unless there are some directors here that wish to pull anything out to speak to individually. Okay, so you have some questions, so I'm okay to move these as a block with questions in just.
Can we just do the questions first?
Well, I'm going to move it, and then you can still do questions. R31, 1 through 30, unless you have something. So I've got a few questions. Maybe we'll go to the few questions first, like that's Director Acton just suggested. And so questions for staff. Go ahead, Mr. Director Wilson.
Just a very quick one. There's, as you said, there's 30 odd items on there. Without me looking through that, is there anywhere on there where there's a huge expenditure that I haven't seen? to save me
Jeez,
looking for
here
it.
I thought I was going to move around. Okay.
So we have some big projects that we're carrying on, and, you know, Arbutus Ridge, for example, we're finishing up the sewer, so there's a bunch of money still there, and that gets carried over. Cobble Hill, of course, is another, we've got a big project there coming in, and that's also being carried over. So the funding was there already and was already approved, it's just being, you know, we'll be moving into.
There's nothing new that really that of huge.
Let's see. Let's see. We've got a couple cases where we've got allowances for some projects that we don't have. Where we're trying to develop wells, and we don't really have the money to develop and tie it in. So we're assuming, and there's properties that are zoned, so we're assuming connection fees would pay that cost. So we put it in. It doesn't affect the charges to the customers because it would be connection fees paying the cost of it. But it is a little bit of a lump, a couple of them around $200,000 sort of figure. We've got that in there. We've got some money in Shining Lake North for looking to get out or deal with our 4321. So we put some allowance in there that we have for that. Saltaire, of course, we've got our ongoing project money and 4321 and whatnot. There's a fair bit of money there. And that's mostly carryover from 2018, and there's new money that's coming for 2019. In that case, we're assuming that, and of course, our director's not there, unfortunately, but I'll just speak to this side. We're assuming that we need to know what's going to happen in 4321 first before we spend more money on our pipe upgrade. So here's our director. There's a question about any larger expenditures amongst the water system. So I'm just mentioning that in Saltaire we have ongoing work that we're carrying over into 2019. We have the 4321 Spectre. We do have an application going in for funding for that, which would be next week, and that's being worked on. And also, sorry, Saltaire's already in. That's correct. Sorry, that's why I got Louise here. Okay. Saltaire's already in a number of months ago. Shawnigan's going in as well, so we have some allowances for that. In Saltaire, we're going to be meeting with the public and talking about priorities between ongoing work on the pipe replacement program and 4321 and those kinds of things. So that's coming up this spring. Any other big lumps?
Completing capital work.
Yeah, we've got lots of completing capital work that's moving over from
So
other
while
things.
the other
Hunter Bay,
two
we're finishing up.
directors-
UBO, we're finishing up projects. Yeah.
While the other two directors were away, we were moving 1 through 30 as a block, and there was just a few questions. So that's what we were thinking of doing, and Director Nicholson has a question. Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't remember. I talked to Louise before, but I'm a little bit concerned about Dogwood because
Right.
there is, what was the reserve again?
I've got that here. Do you? Okay.
7,000.
So we have 7,000 in operating
Yeah.
reserves and nothing in capital reserve?
Yeah, so I'm concerned because that system's not that, there's some issues with it, so I think
Yes.
that we should up it a little bit.
Yeah, we talked about that.
So
We
you
thought maybe-
would like to pull that one,
Yeah,
Director
pull-
Nicholson?
yes, I
So
think
could you
so.
tell me
Okay.
what number it is, please?
613?
Number in this.
Oh, sorry.
Number 8, is that
Number
correct?
8, yes.
Okay, I see it as number 8, so we will pull number 8 to speak to on its own. Is there any other ones that you'd like to pull on their own? Director Acton, you had a general question? Okay, go ahead, Director Acton.
So I realize that these are all user pay, and some of them do have some large requisitions. Is there a point, at any point, that we go to the community to ask them what they want to do? Or is it because they've made an agreement for you to run it at a certain efficiency that you just do it anyway, or?
No, well, it depends on the level of change that might be coming up. So I just talked about Saltaire, so we've already repeatedly promised the community there to bring forward, and we've done a bunch of work on a number of things, and we've now got some big issues to talk about. So we're going to bring that forward in a big way with the community and have a big meeting with them. I anticipate that in Shawnigan, we'll probably have a similar thing with our 4321 cost and what that looks like. If we happen to get one of the grants that pays 100%, maybe not so much of a discussion then, because we just pay it out. But anything that involves a substantial change, and especially if we need assent, if we need them to formally agree through a petition or referendum or something, then we really have to meet with them. We are trying, though, to, we put a lot more work in recent years into more regular updates. So we send out letters with some updates and more information to the customers so they kind of know what the trends are, what the upcoming issues are, so it isn't so much of a surprise. But we definitely do meet with our customers. And of course, we have the, the big initiative of asset management as well. And in the systems where that's a fairly big implication cost-wise, we're definitely going to have to meet with them and explain all of that.
Director Salmon, do you want one pulled? You want to speak to something by itself? Then we can pull it. 29 and 30. Okay, Director Kuhn, do you have two that need to be, any that need to be pulled? Okay, Director Kuhn.
Yeah, the 653, the supplement for $40,000 for the well development. What is that all? Which well? What?
So this is the tying in Yuba water system as partly surface water from Yuba
Oh, that's
Creek.
a tie-in with
Yes,
with
it's
Creekside?
the new well to bring it in.
I thought that was all taken care of.
No, we've been waiting for, because of the new licensing issue, they're now, all groundwater has to be licensed. And so it's been a very, very slow process getting that through. In fact, we just got word that they're going to give us a license for that well. So we've been waiting a long time. And we just got word that that's going to proceed. So we're getting out our engineering work and everything else. We're going to do the work for this. So all this is putting we've got about $40,000 available of current money that we're anticipating we have through 2019. So we're just making that available to the project should costs come in higher than we expect. In recent tenders, throughout all of South Island, numbers have come in quite high. So we're just making that, we'd like to make that available in the budget should it come in more expensive than we expect.
Follow up, Director Kuhn?
Yeah, but we already paid 120,000 or something like this for it.
Yes, for engineering costs and some other things, yeah.
That was the engineering cost?
Yes.
And this is just for the tie-in?
It's for the tie-in, and it just we've got money there already that's carried over, but because of this concern, we thought we could use some current money from it doesn't hurt the budget, we're not increasing rates.
Okay.
It's just money we have available within the budget.
That's fine, thank you.
To bring that into this project, yeah.
Okay, a motion to move 1 to 28, and with the exception of 8. So, no, 1 to 28, 29 and 30 were pulled out for Director Salmon. And number 8 was pulled for Director Nicholson. So all of the rest, we move as a block. A motion for that, please. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? We move now to number 8, Director Nicholson.
So we were thinking, if I may, Madam Chair, that
Yes.
a $30 increase to requisition would be appropriate this year. It adds a little bit, this is for Dogwood Ridge, it adds, it's a small system, so it's not a lot of money, but we thought that could be socked away at least regularly and start to accumulate, work a bit towards putting some money away for that
So
system.
you're happy, you're going to be moving
Yeah,
function
$30 per
613?
user. $30 per customer,
Okay, so,
which works out to, that's $990, adding to the requisition.
so what do I move?
You're moving function 613 Dogwood Ridge Water if you're not changing anything.
I am changing it.
Yes,
Oh,
with this
changing
increase to
it.
requisition, to
Ah.
parcel tax, or as
Okay.
it's called, requisition in there.
Okay, so we've got
Do you
that.
have-
Somebody's got that
do you have
somewhere.
words?
Yeah.
Because I don't.
Do you have words,
Okay.
Brian? Do you have words?
We need to hear that again. Thank you.
So that the requisition
I was totally lost on that.
for budget 613 be increased by $990 per year. $990, yeah, which is $30 per customer.
Okay, that has been
move
moved.
that.
Is there a seconder? Seconder? Oh, there we go. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on now for Director Salmon, who's pulled number 29 and number 30. So 29 is function 690 Cary Village Water System.
Yeah, Cary Village Water, just curious, well, two things, how much is their annual fee and the supplemental of 200,000 for well development? You say a little bit what that's for?
Sure, I'll speak to the well development. Well, oh, we got the numbers here.
They're paying 200 per home, 200 a year in requisition, and the mobile homes pay 500 a year. For user fees, the homes pay 667 a year.
Right, because we have mobile homes in one part
They
and
use it. Mobile
single-family
homes use a
residents in
little bit
another,
less.
So
And
there's some for requisition.
And the requisition for everybody is $200 per home,
per property.
per property.
Is it remaining, Director Salmon, or is there changes?
No, we don't have changes there, no.
No changes.
No changes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's static. So the $200,000 is, it's an allowance. We've been trying to add more water to the system, and we're hoping to be able to find a well. We've got this one that we've looked at, but it's quite close to residents, and we're not sure it's gonna work at all. But if we do able to find a well, one way to have some support for that is by connection fees, so that adjacent properties that are zoned to enable, what's our word? Subdivision, sorry, there's a word. That enable subdivision, that they could contribute to the system and then join it, and then they would pay for this extra water that would be enough for their needs and to add more to the community itself. So that's just an allowance in there, so we have it in, so we don't have to amend the budget in future, if that comes about.
Okay,
Will you be moving?
We've also got a little bit of gas tax in there,
29 as is?
yes, and 30.
Oh,
As
both
is.
of them as is.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're moving, it's been moved. Is there a seconder? There's been moved and second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to number 32, which is drainage functions, and it is a block 1 through 9, unless somebody would like one pulled. Okay, is there a seconder? Any discussion for the drainage function R32? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Moving on now to R33, which is the sewer system budget function 800 series, a report from water management. This is 1 through, what do we got here?
24.
1 through 24. We'd also like to move this as a block unless there is some that need to be pulled to be discussed separately or changed. I'm seeing, okay, we're moving them as a block, 1 through 24. It's been moved. Is there a seconder? It's been moved and second. Is there any discussion on 1 through 24? Woo-wee. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Okay.
Thank you, Madam
So
Chair.
I should have let you know when we came back, there is a motion that the committee waive notice of motion to go into a closed session under CC Part 4, Division 3, Section 91G. And this needs to be unanimous because it is a waived notice.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Okay,
We should finish items 8, 9, and 10 first.
8, 9, and 10. Oh, thank you. I really want to move on, sorry. I was just giving them, so I do that at the very, okay, I was giving the heads up, I was going to do that after we, yes, okay. Sorry, is there any unfinished business? I don't think,
There's none,
new business?
there's no new business.
Question period. Is there anybody in the gallery that wishes to ask me a question? So, question period, we now go into a motion that the committee waive notice and go into closed session under CC Part 4, Division 3, Section 91G. And this needs to be unanimous because it was waived earlier. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? So we are now going into closed.